Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we were discussing the master as I saw him last Monday, and it was an afternoon on St. George's Drive in Pimlico in London, where Nivedita remembers her first meeting, which she says was the last she had in a small group. The other meetings which he had in that season, that particular season, when he gave a series of lectures in the Princess Hall in Piccadilly, they were all public talks. So this was, I think, the first, and for at least for a few days, this or a few months, this was the only personal meeting. Not personal; it is small, in a small gathering. So, but that's why she says she doesn't remember the entire conversation, but only fragments of the talk she had. But whatever she remembers, it had a very great influence on her. So we discussed the different questions she asked on pantheism, and he spoke about the Bhagavad Gita. And then she says, he told us that the love or bhakti yoga, as it was described in the Bhagavad Gita, is which is discussed elaborately in the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism. It is the same as what the Christian mystics and the Christian saints describe as the highest religious emotion. So, what is known as bhakti in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, in the words of the Christian mysticism, it is considered to be the highest religious emotion, that is love for God. So, another thing, as we discussed last time, that struck her very much, which was quite new to her, was that both body and the mind were regarded by the Hindus as something which is transitory. And it was the third aspect or the existence which dominated the body and the mind, and that was called as the self, the idea of Atman. So she remembers, because in most of the Western religious traditions, the mind or the subtle self itself is supposed to be the soul. So we don't posit a third existence, which we call as the human soul. So the human soul or the spirit, though the word spirit is mentioned in the Bible and all the other religions as well, the difference between matter and spirit, that has been, but the spirit is very often confused in Western theology or the Western religions, the other religions, as the self, and that itself is considered to be the self. So that is the difference. So a tripartite existence where body and the subtler aspect of the body, which is the mind, and a third entity, which is known as the self, dominates both these two. So that is the fundamental difference which Swami Vivekananda, she remembers Swami Vivekananda mentioned, and it struck her as something unique. Then she remembers that he was describing the difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. And she says, I remember the quiet words, the Buddhists accepted the report of the senses. Though some of the sects deny the existence or the report of the senses, they consider it as unreal. That is, they tend towards a theory of Shunyavada or nihilism, but many of the Buddhist traditions, they accepted the report of the senses. So, in this respect, according to her, Buddhism must have been in strong contrast with modern agnosticism, whose fundamental suspicion as to the subjective illusion of the senses. The senses and all the inference based on the subjective illusion of the senses, that is what Hinduism also uh, claims, would surely bring it more in line with Hinduism. So she believed that this was what she understood from the very little conversation she had, that whether the Buddhists really accepted the subjective illusion of the senses, and then it would definitely bring Buddhism in line, would surely bring it more in line with Hinduism. They at least on this point, uh, it would be parallel with the Hindu belief and thought, which according to the modern agnostics, they would believe that it is not true. How can the things which are seen by our eyes, ears, smelt by the nose, seen the objects of the senses and the senses themselves and the experience is as real as anything else in the world. So to consider it to be any subjective illusion, it would be wrong. That is what the agnostics believe. But Buddhists uh, partially believed it, at least some sects of Buddhists believed it, and they were in that was in strong contrast with modern agnosticism. So she had studied Buddhism, but the very fact that these uh, ideas of the subjective illusion of the sensory things and the sense objects, which Hinduism, especially the Advait Vedanta, believes that they are illusion in the sense they are projections of the real self on things which are transitory. So that fundamental idea was rather new to her, though she remembers that he mentioned the other aspect of Buddhism, which slightly differed from Hinduism. So then, anyway, but the main point she learned that day was that how he objected to the word faith and insisted on the word realization or experience, because he says spirituality is not something should be based on faith or belief. Faith here means more, it has a connotation, I mean, it denotes some kind of belief without conviction. But faith with conviction is Shraddha, which is slightly different from what the word faith means. In faith, you have to believe certain dogmas or certain things because they are mentioned in the scriptures, but they cannot be called as realization. But if somebody experiences that truth, then it doesn't remain a faith anymore. It becomes a realization. So he objected that you cannot translate the word Shraddha as it appears in the Hindu scriptures and translate it as faith. That would be trivializing the idea of Shraddha. Shraddha means faith based on certain experiences, certain convictions, and realizations. So that is another thing she remembers. Then she thinks that the doctrine of reincarnation, which was also highly debated in society in those days, was touched upon in this particular parlor talk, as she termed it. It was a small parlor, a small room where, say, 30 people had gathered. There was a fireplace since it was winter on that house on 64 St. George's Drive. That building is still there. Perhaps that fireplace is still there, unless they have modified. Externally, there is a little modification, or maybe they have renovated it. But internally, the building, I think, of course, there will be some internal renovation as well. But most of the structure is as it was in those days. So anyway, that in that parlor talk, she remembers that one of the topics that was covered in discussion, maybe somebody had asked a question and Swami Vivekananda had responded to that. It was the doctrine of reincarnation, which is accepted not only by Hinduism but Buddhism and Jainism, and also of Sikhism as well, the four major religions which had their origin in the Indian subcontinent. Then she remembers that he spoke of karma, bhakti, jnana as the three paths of the soul. Of course, Raj Yoga is the fourth path, which he mentioned later, but I think he included because Raj Yoga is fundamental to all the three yogas. The control of vrittis, or the control of the thought waves, which is the subject matter of Raj Yoga, it need not be considered as a separate yoga. Normally, in Indian tradition, karma, bhakti, and jnana are the three yogas. But Swamiji specifically gave the name Raj Yoga or the Patanjali's yoga as Raj Yoga because he wanted uh, people to develop a separate interest in the fourth faculty, which is to be separated from thinking, feeling, and willing. Western philosophy believes in these three powers of the mind: thinking, that is Jnana Yoga; feeling, when we transmute those emotions and give it a higher direction, then it becomes bhakti. So, thinking part of the human mind results in Jnana Yoga, the cognitive part, where we analyze the perceptions, analyze our thoughts, and see where it takes us. We rationalize everything. That is the path of Jnana Yoga, where you have to follow reason to its logical conclusion. You can't stop anywhere. That is the most difficult path, because if you reason, you have to reason not according to your convenience, but reason in such a way that it takes you and takes you to the ultimate conclusion. You cannot stop anywhere on the way. That would be partial reasoning. That's why Swamiji says, if you believe in rationality, be perfectly rational. And if you are perfectly rational, then you can't accept things without proof. You have to go and find out the ultimate existence, the ultimate truth. Truth is, you cannot compromise, because anything that you find as truth needs to be proved. So the path of reasoning, which is the capacity human being has, the capacity of cognition and thinking, is Jnana Yoga. But there is another kind of thought, mental capacity, that is feeling. So that leads to Bhakti Yoga. And then there is another aspect of the mind which has its impact on our body, which makes us act, and that is the willpower. The act of willing, act of converting thoughts into action. We may have ideas, but to put them into action, it needs a strong willpower. We may have emotions, but how to convert that emotion into a devotional service? For that, you need some kind of willpower. It's not enough to just wish or have a broad heart, but you have to go out and serve. If you really feel compassion, if you really feel the children of God are suffering, then you, even if you want to carry out some action and show that you are really concerned, you really feel from the bottom of your heart, which inspires you to serve the children of the Lord, then you have to have that kind of willpower, which is a mental thing. It is in the mind. The will is also in the mind. The emotions are also in the mind, and the third faculty, the reasoning capacity, is also in the mind. So we have, in effect, we have three yogas. But Swamiji gave a separate yoga, which is known as Raj Yoga, which is another aspect of the mind which is common to karma, bhakti, and jnana, and that is Raj Yoga. Because controlling of these thoughts, whether it is emotion or whether it is will, or also whether it is thought, when they are controlled and directed towards the self, then the power of restraining generates tremendous energy, and that is known as Raj Yoga. So here, but she remembers that he spoke about karma, bhakti, and jnana, the three paths of the soul towards the divine. I know, she says, he dwelt for a while on the infinite power of man. That may be the message of Raj Yoga he might have given. And that infinite power of man, which is locked within, can be uh, manifest when you restrain your thoughts and don't dissipate your energy. So that infinite power is lying there, but we should know how to tap it, how to direct it. It is not enough to build a dam. You should know how to control the water of the river, store it, and then use it, channelize that energy which you have generated. So the infinite power is in man, but it has to be tapped, and it has tremendous potential. So But then finally, he came to the conclusion that no doubt there are different paths, whether you call it three paths or four paths, karma, bhakti, jnana. In different religions, there are different paths. Some people may follow the path of bhakti. Most of the religions, they follow the path of bhakti, because to love God is understood even by a person who cannot rationalize, who doesn't have that reasoning power. But everybody has that power of emotion, the power of love. So if you want to love something, you love God. So that is how the Christian mystics and all the mystics of different religion, they base their religion or religious path on the feeling of man, the emotional attachment to things of the world. If they are directed, the love we have for, as Sri Ramakrishna beautifully put it, the love we have for money, the love we have for the child's love for its mother, the husband's love for, or the chaste wife's love for her husband, and the miser's love for the money. All we need to is to direct that love towards God. If we direct it towards mammon or money, as Jesus said, we will uh, we cannot reach the kingdom of God. To reach the kingdom of God, you have to give up. So that message, central message of all religions, the call to renunciation, the call to give up the things of the world so that you can reach the kingdom of God, or the get salvation or reach nirvana, that is the one message which is common to all religions. Nobody says you can have both the world and God together. So that she remembers uh, very well. And also she remembers in that talk, Swami Vivekananda mentioned that priests and temples and all rituals were secondary. They were not never considered to be the highest kind of religion in India. Anything that had to do with rituals or priestcraft, it was always given a second place or a lower place. Not that it was bad, but it was not essential for higher uh, kind of religion. And even the desire to heaven, which these priests, most of the priests in Hinduism, as you find in other religions also, he says India considers that effort to reach heaven also by these means which are suggested by the priest. Is they, most religious or most sincerely spiritual people consider it as a little vulgar. So they say that is not the way of the world. Heaven is nothing but some kind of sanctified, or maybe a superior than the enjoyment we have in the world. It's the call the quality may be different, but it is enjoyment all the same. So it was not considered to be the highest pursuit, though it attracted a lot of devotees. That is what every religion does. Priestcraft has a hold on the common masses because they still are not done with their enjoyment. But such people, according to Swamiji, that is what Sister Nivedita learned from Swamiji that day, Swami Vivekananda's parlor talk, that this is not the highest aspect of Indian religious thought. They are supposed to be these concepts, like even the desire to reach heaven through rituals and other things, the priests, the temples, they are considered to be either secondary or detrimental to true spirituality. So he says he must have made some statements, as Nivedita does not remember perfectly, but she remembers that he said he referred directly or indirectly to the ideal of the freedom of the soul, which is unique to India, the idea of mukti. Though the word salvation means that, but the freedom of the soul, the word freedom, physical freedom, mental freedom, freedom from the senses, then finally freedom from any kind of bondage, that the soul becomes free. It is freed from the prison house of the body and the world. So this, according to her, when this idea was explained, it brought Hinduism into some kind of apparent conflict with the Western concept of service of humanity. Because The Western concept is that by serving humanity, you are doing good to the world as the goal of individual. Every Western, the theology or the Western ideas that were developing during that period was that we do not know, we do not know what is the nature of the spirit or the freedom, salvation, and all the wonderful things that Jesus has spoken. But we know there is suffering in humanity, and service of humanity is the highest goal of the individual. So, Swamiji tried to convince that that is not the goal. It may be a means to the goal, but the goal is higher. Nobody says, I serve a human being or human beings. Service of humanity is the goal. I just do it. Nobody can say that. He says in India, we accept service as karma yoga. Service of humanity is, if it is done as karma yoga without attachment, then it leads you to the freedom of the soul. The goal does not change. Goal is always moksha, mukti, or the freedom of the soul. But it can be attained. Freedom can be attained, or freedom can be reached, or freedom can be realized by working without attachment. And in that sense, service of humanity, serving the God in man, serving the man as God, that idea, serving him as the spirit, the divine spirit, which is animating every human being. So that idea was mm, uh, the fundamental idea behind all the conceptions of service, the ideas of service which India had. And that was in apparent conflict of the Western conception, according to Nivedita, which said that service of humanity is the goal by itself. You have to serve because that is the highest ideal. But why should I serve? There is no, it has to be rational. You have to understand what is the purpose of serving, what is the ultimate goal. Only when you have the freedom of soul as the goal, then you really serve in the right spirit. You don't expect any return because you have done your service as a service of God and you don't ask anything for in return. So she remembers very clearly that she heard him use the word society for the first time that afternoon. Normally, he was talking about Vedanta, God, the self. But the idea of society, how to relate spiritual truths to society, she heard for the first time. In the sense that I am never quite sure of having fully understood what he meant, how he defined society. He had, as I suppose she says, stated the ideal and he hastened to anticipate our opposition. That service to society, service to humanity, doing good for society, all those things Swamiji knew were uppermost in the minds of all this so-called modern intellectual England in those days. So he had anticipated. So he definitely uh, used the word society and to show that how to really benefit society. You will say, he said, anticipating what Nivedita and others would perhaps ask him, you will say, he said, that this does not benefit society. If I try to be free from bondage, then how will it help society? How will it benefit society? I would rather benefit society and do service of humanity because my compassion tells me to do that. But how to reconcile it with individual freedom? So, but before this objection can be admitted, you will have to first prove that the maintenance of society is an object in itself. Now, that was the challenge he put before these Western disciples, who the would-be disciples. They had come eagerly wanting to know, get some wisdom, Eastern wisdom from this Hindu monk. And they found that certain ideas apparently conflicted with the Western idea of service of humanity, which was uppermost in their minds, and they thought it is an object in itself. But he says, can you prove to me? Can anyone here prove to me that maintenance of society is the goal for which you are born? Somebody else will say, no, that is not the goal. But everybody has to accept that he wants to be free, he wants to be free from sorrow, he wants to be free from bondage. You ask even the worm, not why human beings. No worm, no bird, no animal wants to be caged. Nobody wants to be in the prison house. Bondage of any kind, physical, mental, or spiritual, is is not acceptable to any human being, any created being, and especially human beings uh, always try for the freedom of the soul. So that Swamiji said, we can show, Vedanta can show, all other religions, including Jesus, showed that the goal of our human endeavor is freedom, not knowledge. It is freedom that we are trying. Knowledge helps us to attain that freedom. Service helps us to attain that freedom. Through service, through karma yoga done properly, we may reach that freedom. Through proper knowledge, through the right knowledge, which is Jnana Yoga, we may reach that freedom. And through controlling and directing our emotions properly towards the highest reality, which is known as God, we get freedom. So, freedom is the goal. It is an object which we want to attain. Whereas maintenance of society, he challenged those people that you can never prove that you were born to maintain society, to help society. Then there will be enough number of people who say, I am happy without helping anybody, looking after my own interest. Why should I be motivated? If you go and tell them you should uh, help or serve society, maintenance of society is your goal. You go and tell a rich man, he is not going to agree. He said, that is not my goal. Show me why it should be my goal. I have earned this money, I'll spend it, I will keep it, I will save it, I will give it to whomsoever I want, my own relatives. Why should I spend my hard earned money and serve society? He doesn't have a motivation to do that. Whereas Swami Vivekananda said, the Eastern religions give him a motivation. He said, are you going to die bound by all these things which ultimately you are not going to use? They choose the indirect way. They said, if you use the money wisely, if you use the bondage which you are in and try to slowly come out of it, not that you have to give up, as Jesus said, you just give up the world, you can't have mammon and God at the same time. So most of his disciples found it difficult. They said, we would rather keep the money and the wealth we have acquired rather than follow this person. He says, you sell everything and come after me. How can I go after him? These things are very dear to us. So there will be enough, or a majority of the people will not accept that serving society can be the goal. They say, no, serving our own self, serving our own family, serving at the most, serving our own family, our descendants or relatives, that is the maximum we can do. We have no duty towards the society. So, Sister Nivedita says, at that time I understood him to mean humanity by society. When he always spoke of society, it was not in the sense of, it was not a sociological term for him. He meant that entire humanity, and to be preaching the ultimate futility of the world, and therefore of the work done to aid it. So it is like, if you say, I'm working only to help humanity, and human beings, the moment they don't give you any credit for what you have done, all the time you think that by doing somebody something good. In fact, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who also believed in this theory that he should help everybody, and he had some bitter experiences. He helped, and the very people whom he helped, they behaved so badly with him after taking all the help that he lost faith in charity. So he became so bitter towards the end that when somebody criticized him, he said, Have I helped you any time? Then why are you slandering me? Why are you criticizing me? Means he had so many bad experiences of helping other people, and instead of gratitude, they just happened to criticize him. So he lost faith. So that is what will happen when you think maintenance or helping society is the only goal, and you are desperately going and exerting yourself in trying to help society. And then when society does not recognize, because you don't have freedom as the goal. If you had freedom as your goal, freedom of the soul as your goal, and done that service as in a spirit of worship of God or worship of truth, then it would have released you. It would not have pained you. You would not expect any return, and you would do it with full of joy, whether the person acknowledged, person who got the help acknowledged. That is what Jesus said, that when the right hand gives, the left hand should not know. What did he mean? That don't be uh, full of ego that you have helped somebody. That cannot be the goal. As Jesus said, if the right hand giveth, the left hand ought not to know that you have given. Means even you should not take pride in the fact that you are. That's why Swami Vivekananda in his Karma Yoga says, it is for your benefit that the underprivileged people and God gives you an opportunity to serve. You are just a trustee. It is His wealth. You are giving back to them. And with the spirit of service, if you do this Karma Yoga or Seva Yoga as it is known, you serve society by trying to worship the divinity. It becomes worship and immediately it gives you the highest salvation. So, the ultimate futility of serving for the sake of considering that serving society is an object in itself was totally wrong and ill conceived. So, for the first time, I think Nivedita understood what he wanted to say. So, then she says, uh, he touched. Then this is another point she remembers: the service of God in man, which she later was to hear from him when she came to India. Swamiji explained to her with what spirit she should serve. Don't come, he had told her, to India with a patronizing attitude. Oh, they are the subject people, they are being ruled by the colonial, which he wanted India to be free from the colonial rule. Don't come with an attitude of helping, come with the attitude of service. Dedicate yourself if you want. Serve the girls whom you are educating, serve the people whom you are trying to help with the spirit of worshipful service, as if you are serving your Lord, your Ishta by doing so. And don't come with a patronizing attitude that I am there to help you. You have to acknowledge my help and uh, feel proud about it. Many people, when Swamiji says in his Karma Yoga, the moment they donate something, they want their newspaper, they want their names to be appear in newspapers, and they want it to be acknowledged in such a way that the whole world knows that they have done such great charity. He says that is not the way to serve. You don't go with a patronizing attitude. If you have that attitude, don't come to India. He had warned her. He said, if you come, come as a simple, humble servant of the Lord and try to serve him in the young girls whom you will educate, and that will lead to your freedom. Atmano mokshartham jagadhitayacha. That is the wonderful motto he gave to the Ramakrishna mission. That means you serve for your own freedom. Atmano mokshartham. How to attain that freedom? By slowly giving up the ego, by serving in a humble spirit. So it is the attitude with which you serve makes it karma yoga. Not out of arrogance, helping out of arrogance or helping out of pride, expecting a return all the time, at least expecting gratitude, which Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, he was disillusioned because he went on helping people, and instead of thanking him for his efforts, many of them, as it happens in society, selfish people don't remember the good deeds that they have done for you. They will simply, at the first available opportunity, they used to criticize. Then he became so upset that in the end, when if somebody criticized him, he would say to himself, what have I done? I have not done any good to him or given him something. Why is he abusing me without any reason? That means he came to the conclusion that all the people whom I have helped have in fact turned against me, and not only not acknowledged my help which I gave them, but also criticized me for that. So that is what happens if you have an altruistic attitude without proper spiritual background. So next, he uh, he says another incident, another dialogue she remembers, that he was asked, why are you wandering? Somehow, why he was so indifferent to do work in an organized way. In England, with great hesitation, he started the Ramakrishna movement. He was he valued freedom so much that he believed that no religious organization is necessary. So in fact, when he was asked, why don't you organize yourself? You have so many wonderful ideas, just organize yourself, create an organization. Ultimately, he did, but he took care to see that the organization does not end up as a fanatical movement. So, he says your faith or your belief should not end in a church or a temple. It should not be limited to it. It may be nurtured in the church, it may be nurtured in the temple, it may be nurtured in the organization. But he says we believe that if we that all organizations always breed new evils. So that was his mind at that time in the first meeting. But afterwards, when he finally decided to start an organization, he made it, he wanted to make sure that it will not breed further evil. So this dialogue she remembers. And also, as she mentioned earlier, that it's good to be born in a church. You develop your faith, you develop your, it's good to be born in a temple, it's good to be born in the sense to find a new path, a new way of life. That is the role of an organization. Afterwards, it is an individual journey, and you should not be expected to die there. In the sense, you should not think that is the last word. You have to go and follow truth till it leads you to its ultimate conclusion. So he prophesied that many of these religious developments which are in vogue in the West will speedily die owing to the love of money. If the love for money enters any organization, he says their end is coming close. I mean, they are coming close to the end of that movement. So he was very careful that excessive love for money, whatever you need, it is fine to run the organization, but beyond that, it can breed new evils. So he declared, but still he accepted that certain organizations are inevitable because man proceeds from lower truth to higher truth, not from error to truth. These things have a place in society, these organizations, but one should not stop. One should always seek higher truth. So, this was indeed the master thought which appealed to Sister Nivedita at that time, that he continually approached truth from different points of view. He accepted the Christian view, accepted the Hindu view, accepted all paths as valid paths. The equal truth of all religions, if you go deeper, if you touch the core, every path takes you to the goal. But if you get stuck in the rituals, get stuck in the unessentials, the inessentials of religion, then it is impossible to reach the goal. So you have to go from lower truth. It may be a truth. At a certain stage, you need it. You need the organization. You need all these things. But a day should come when you should uh, lift yourself up and search for a higher truth. Not from error, not that what you did in the past was an error. When the child played with the toys, it was not an error, it was valid at that time. But when it grows up, it gives up the toys not because they are wrong, but because they are too trivial. You have outgrown the lower truth and you want higher truths, you want higher achievements, higher things. You want to go after them. So that is how this was a wonderful teaching she remembers in her first meeting, that man proceeds from lower truth to a higher truth, not from error to truth. You should never point out any mistakes or errors and tell a man that that is wrong, this is right. There's no such thing as absolute wrong. It is a lower truth. You ought to do better. You have to ought to follow a higher truth. That was a wonderful message which told her what positivity was all about. Not to tell a person that he is wrong, but to tell him that you can do better. You have done fine. Whatever you have done till now is fine. But that is what Sri Ramakrishna taught Swami Vivekananda. And that is what Nivedita learned from Swami Vivekananda. Because Swamiji once mentioned to his disciples that one of the greatest things I observed in Sri Ramakrishna was to lift a person from wherever he was, whatever state of level, whatever state he was, whatever level he was, and take him and then give him a lift. So he was a true educator. That is the essence of true education, that you don't tell a person that he is wrong. Don't criticize him. Don't put him off. Even the children, when they are told, their day and night, when you point out and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is your fault, they get disgusted. You have to tell him that what you have done is a lower truth. That is fine, but now you have to outgrow it. You have to go after higher things. That is how we teach and ask people not to not do certain things because it is wrong, but not to do because there are higher things in life that you can aspire for, that you can strive for. So that is the positive approach to religion which she learned. And then she says it was impossible after that for us to criticize any of the divine incarnations in any religion, since all were equally shining or fourth shinings of that one absolute truth. So that is why for the first time she said that after this wonderful explanation of Swamiji, that you are going from lower truth to higher truth, she says it was impossible for us from that day to criticize anybody, any religion, and criticize any path. So he quoted then, she remembers, the greatest of all verses of the Gita, that whenever religion decays and whenever irreligion prevails, when people trivialize religion and do all sorts of things in the name of religion, uh, the evil of priestcraft, of the worst kind, really all religious movements have seen that, how people using the using politics and using money, power, they try to dominate and exploit the sentiments, religious sentiments, and put so much faith, fear in the innocent people, in the innocent masses, making them uh, telling them that you will be damned to eternal hell and all those things. In every religion, in trying to control, people have exploited the innocence and the fear that is in the minds of people, and tried to prove to them that they are guilty, they are sinners, again and again harping on. That is why Swami Vivekananda in his Chicago addresses, he said it is a sin to call a man a sinner, to call a person that he is a sinner, and exploiting, terrorizing him, and saying that you will go to hell, and maybe out of fear he will try to oblige that particular organization. So every religion had this evil of priestcraft, if not in the proper sense. Priests can be good. The priestcraft or the intermediaries of religion can be positive, if they really want the welfare of the followers. But very often history has shown, borne witness to the fact that when the desire for power and desire for money came, this priestcraft proved to be evil. So Gita understood that it is when religion is held in dishonor and it falls into the hands of greedy people, powerful people, it politicians try to dominate it. Then he says, for the protection of the good, who are really spiritual, and for destruction of the evil, for the firm establishment of truth, I am born again and again. So all these prophets, when they come because there is some evil in society which needs to be cleaned up. When that job is over, a new form of evil is uh, bred by the wrong following of religious ideas, dogmas, and other things. They lead to a different kind of evil. Then again the Lord has to come in another form. So every appearance, Nivedita got convinced that every appearance of the Lord, of the prophets, is meant to clean certain things. That is why when Jesus went to the synagogues and drove out the money lenders who were using the holy sacred place, he says, you have turned my father's place into a these people have turned my father's place into a den of thieves. That is the word he used. And in fact, he got so angry that he drove them out of that place of worship. He said, "What have you done to my father's place? Father in heaven, I mean God's place. This is God's place. This is not the place uh, where money changers and all the evils were going on." So he took a stick and literally beat them and drove them out, saying that, "Don't convert the pure place, the holy place of my father, and let thieves, let it be converted into a den for thieves." So we find that in every age, whether it was Buddha or whether it was Krishna, whether every time they incarnated, they came to remove certain evils for the destruction of evil. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srujamyam. I am born again and again for the destruction of the evil. Whenever the evil forces, especially motivated by religion, by wrongly making use of the religion for their selfish purposes, when that kind of evil increases in society, somebody, some great prophet is born, some great saint is born, some great spiritual personality is born for the establishment of the real truth of spirituality. So Nivedita was very much impressed. In the first meeting, all these things were discussed. Then she says we were not very orthodox or open to belief because she belonged to the modern generation, which had started questioning all the different society movements inspired by the religious movements of that time. So the religious movement created an impact on society, and many of the things which young people did not like, they did not want any kind of restriction on their freedom, true spiritual freedom. So that they've started revolting against that. So she says we were not very orthodox in the sense that we would not blindly accept anything that was said. We had enough reasoning and we would accept a religious truth, whether it belonged to any religion, as true. That's why she studied Buddhism, she studied other religions. She wanted to know, does it satisfy my conscience? Is it something which is truly beneficial? And they were ready. They were not orthodox. They were liberals who decided to follow religion only if it convinces them of its utility, of its true value, true benefit. So, since they were not very orthodox or open to any kind of blind belief, we who had come to meet the Hindu yogi, Swami Vivekananda, as he was called in London at that time, so they had come with the attitude to question him, if necessary, argue against him. They had not come as to blindly follow and gobble up whatever he had for them. Many of the Hindu leaders or many of the yogis, so-called yogis, who later on came to the West, exploited this. They just expected their disciples to believe whatever they wanted to tell without questioning, which Sri Ramakrishna did not like. He told his Swami Vivekananda, when he came as a student, full of disbelief, full of a rational attitude, full of a scientific spirit. He said, "You test me as somebody tests the coins. You test me and see if it appeals to you. I'm not saying to you to expect anything based on blind belief." So that is why Sri Ramakrishna told him that don't accept anything. And that was one of the fundamental principles that Swami Vivekananda believed. So he was not a Hindu yogi who would expect or everybody who came to believe blindly. Then a white-haired lady, a old lady obviously, with a historic name, who sat on the Swami's left. She's not naming, I think she was a friend of Frederick Denison Morris. I don't know who he was, but she was a very aged lady and with a historic name. she doesn't want to disclose her name, who sat on the Swami's left and took lead in questioning him with such exquisiteness of courtesy, was perhaps the least unconventional of the group in matters of belief. She was very unconventional. She was not conventional, but still she was very polite. And she had been a friend and disciple of Frederick Denison Morris. Our hostess and one or two others were interested in those modern movements. This old haired lady, whose name Nivedita is not mentioning, was a very courteous but absolutely unconventional type of lady who perhaps was interested in modern movements, reform movements, because they were perhaps not very happy with the way things were going on in religious movements. So she wanted any modern movement which had a rational basis, which was based on truth, which could convince her, that would be accepted. So, but most of us, unlike that lady, Nivedita says, I incline to think had been singled out for that afternoon's hospitality on the very score of our unwillingness to believe, for the difficulty of convincing us, and for the credibility of religious propaganda in general. That is why Sturdy, when he very clearly announced that you have a right to disagree with what this Hindu yogi says. You don't have to accept. He's coming with a broad heart and a very liberal attitude. You can question him. Nobody will ask you to believe what he believes or even approve. So the young group which was there, the lady was very courteous, but Nivedita seems to be saying that we had gone there with the intention of questioning everything that this Hindu yogi, whoever he is, if it does not convince us, if it appears to us as not conducive to truth, we will question him. Uh, we will try to find out what makes him say certain things. He has to prove it, otherwise we are not going to believe. That was the attitude with which she went. So this habit, she says, which was born of the constant need to protecting the judgment against ill-considered enthusiasm. She says most of the people who follow religion, they have some kind of enthusiasm which is ill-considered or not properly analyzed, and she felt that we have to protect our judgment of judging. We should judge things only not out of enthusiasm, but we have to protect ourselves against this ill-considered enthusiasm and blindly follow somebody. So he says, she says that Swami Vivekananda was not at all disturbed by this. It was not new. As one of the, she remembers somebody said, you have said nothing new. All these things have been told by prophets before. So naturally, Swami Vivekananda was subject to a lot of criticism. Many things they accepted and many things they said, okay, you are saying this, but it's just like putting old wine in a new bottle. These things have been told before. So Swami Vivekananda famously would answer, I know it is the same thing, but if it makes you think what our people of the past, the sages of the past have thought about the momentous questions of life, if it makes you think in the present age and find a solution, then my job is done. I don't say it is my own. I am talking the same Vedanta, the eternal truth which was spoken by the rishis, which was spoken by all the prophets, all the incarnations. Again and again, we are repeating the same thing in the language of the present day. I'm not saying I'm telling you something new. So there was some opposition even in that gathering. They said, we accept what you say, not fully, but what is new about it? So he said, why should it be new? Cannot truth is always eternal. There is no kind of new truth or old truth. Truth is truth. The way you tell it, the way, if you convince a person, then truth reveals itself. Whether it comes through the Bible, whether it comes through the Vedas, whether it comes to any other scripture, truth is truth. The eternal truths can never change. If they change, they are not eternal. So he says, how can I tell anything new? These are as ancient as human life. These truths these truths of the universe, they will not change. The law of gravitation was not a new truth. It was Newton's interpretation of a law which existed even before Newton was born. It is a universal law. So Swamiji says, why do you want a new truth? I'm just stating the old truth. When he defined gravity, gravity was existing even before Newton discovered it. And he did not, he said, I've just formulated certain laws on gravity. I made a systematic study and told you in the language which you can understand, in a mathematical language. But he did not claim that he was the founder of gravity. Gravity existed. That is what Swamiji was trying to explain to Nivedita and the others, that I am not, you must have heard it before in some other religion, but perhaps my job to tell you this, to repeat this, that repeating of these eternal truths may inspire you to follow them in your life. That is the only goal. So otherwise repetition is always there. So now let me see if there are some questions. We are coming to a conclusion. We'll continue in the next class. Yes. Well, the first question is, isn't compassion for fellow man motivation in itself? That is the first question. Yes, this is what everybody believes and most of us believe. The problem is compassion for fellow man is not, I'm not saying one should not have compassion, but what is that compassion based on? Now you see, he never said, Jesus never said, or Swami Vivekananda or Vedas, nobody says that compassion is bad. It cannot be a goal in itself. That is what, it cannot be a goal. It can be a motivation to serve. But how you serve is important. If you want to reach the goal, if you want freedom, then it can be a motivation, compassion, but it's not an end in itself. I didn't say it cannot be a motivation. In fact, Buddha was motivated by compassion, but he did not stop at compassion. He said nirvana is the final solution. Out of compassion, I may help a poor man, give him a few dollars, because I can't be compassionate enough to solve the problems of the entire humanity. I solve a problem of a few people, and then expect that and go on telling everybody that, see, I had $1 million, I donated $500 to somebody. So that is not compassion. He may be compassion, he may feel compassion for a poor beggar, but he may just throw some few dollars and say, now go and have a nice meal. Has he really solved that problem? That what is so anything, what is, why should we think that that is the highest motivation? No, that is not the highest motivation. A higher motivation would be how to help him so that his problem will be solved permanently. He doesn't have to beg. Today I may give him out of compassion, I may serve him. Tomorrow who will serve him? Then I said, okay, now let me make him independent, stand on his own feet. Then he will come and say that you have given me a job, everything you have done for me, but now you see I have this problem. I have this, I have this, I have a quarrel with my wife, I cannot maintain a family, I'm again become homeless because of so and so, so and so. Then how long you can help? So compassion it is good to start charity or to start serving others through compassion, but unless you have the highest goal to reach the highest in life, to reach mukti, moksha, freedom, with that you will inspire also him to go towards freedom. So to attain to freedom, compassion can be a motive, but it cannot be the goal. So I agree with what you are saying. Compassion definitely can be a motive to start, but it is not enough to be motivated purely on the basis of compassion. A higher motive is to reach the spirit yourself and help others to get rid of the bondage of the hunger, bondage of through education, then bondage of his desires, which will make him run after money, and again he will suffer and come to you. You remove that bondage, show him the path to nirvana or moksha, that all religious leaders say, they say that. So Swami Vivekananda has beautifully put it. There are different levels. The first gift is the gift of annadana, gift of food. That is how he said the hierarchy of gifts. Lowest is annadana. By giving food, you will satisfy the hunger of a person. But higher than that is vidyadana. You give him some knowledge, maybe he can earn his meals. But in spite of that, he falls sick. So, the dana of medicine, or the dana of saving a life, prana dana, it is known as doctors do, with all the wealth, with all the education, with all the food in his house, if he falls sick and something happens. So, in a hierarchy of serving others, that compassion, you save his life when he's sick. So that is, you begin with annadana, a higher level of donation or higher level of compassion is to enable him to stand on his own legs through vidyadana. Then you go, vidya means the gift of knowledge. Then we give him the gift of life. Suppose he is about to die. With all his annadana, with all the money he has, with all the knowledge he has, if his life itself is not there, what will he do? So saving a life is a still higher compassion or a still higher gift. Then Swami Vivekananda says, but the highest gift is the gift of spiritual knowledge, because that will remove his miseries forever. Can we do that? That is the question. So spiritual, Jesus, Sri Ramakrishna, they give the highest gifts because they teach you how not to feel hungry again, not to be born again, to be free from the bondage of body, to be free from ignorance, that is avidya. Vidyadana also is not required. Once you are not born, then the problem of hunger, the problem of knowledge, the problem of sickness, that is what motivated Buddha. His compassion was so much that he did not want man to be just to feed him. He did not start any charity and said, I am giving you food. No, he said, I am giving you the highest nirvana, because I can give you a gift which will never make you sorrow. Other gifts will help you for a few days. And pranadana also maybe save your life once. But again, you may fall sick and die. And I can't save you from that. I can't save you from hunger. I can't save you from whatever knowledge I give. I can't save you from ignorance. I can't even save you from death. These are beyond my capacity. But while you are living, I can give you the highest gift, the gift of nirvana. And that is why these prophets, they are supposed to be the highest benefactors of mankind. They give the highest gift. So we have to remember this hierarchy. Now, another, yeah. Yeah. Now somebody says, I read that Swamiji used to smoke. Is this not against the principle of Vairagya due to the addictive nature of tobacco? Now you see, we have to look at it in a different context. Swami Vivekananda once asked, he said, when he was young, he used to, because that is what everybody did. And somebody in the West asked him. In fact, Sturdy was a bit upset when he saw that his Swamiji was smoking. But he did not smoke very regularly. But he said, I consider the other bad habits that I had are more important than this. There are so many bad habits. So one habit, if it remains, it's not going to make a huge difference. Because in those days, it was considered smoking, even in the Himalayas. People used to smoke because that kept them, there was so much of cold in those days. So naturally, and moreover, he was not attached to the body. So keeping good health is not the goal for a person who has realized God. So we cannot imitate that. He, of course, he did not tell you to smoke, tell us to smoke, or tell anybody to smoke. He said, since it was not going to significantly affect me and my message and the wonderful thoughts and the wonderful spiritual realizations he had. In fact, that was part. It is as good as telling that smoking was also not eating was also against the principle of Vairagya, and that is what Pavari Baba did. He said, I should not eat food. Then we should not eat also, because Pavari Baba, Pavari means living on air. He used to eat so little, when and Swamiji was inspired by him. He said, if I can follow this, it will be wonderful. He was literally starving himself. He used to eat maybe one small fruit or whatever was offered to him, or sometimes for 7, 8 days he did not eat. So is that the goal? Because that is Vairagya. Then we should not eat. We should not do many things which we are doing. So Swamiji, we have to understand Swamiji's actions. All these great people, uh, their actions have to be understood from the context. It is the mental attitude that is important. For him, there are far greater things to be avoided. The pride which we have, the highest vairagya is giving up of ego, the giving up of many other things, the giving up of greed for money, the giving up the greed for having, as in Bengali it is said, Kamini Kanchan. He said that is the main renunciation which my guru had told me. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna also used to smoke the hubble bubble. Swami Brahmanand used to smoke. The hubble bubble was a kind of pipe which was a norm in those days. In fact, if you go to any of the akhadas in the Himalayas, that is one thing which is permitted. Now modern medical science says it is harmful for the body, but what about other things? There are so many harmful things for the body. The eating of junk food is also equally harmful. Eating of pesticides is harmful. There, how many things will you avoid? But we are still doing it. So, in that context, we have to see that it is nothing to do with Vairagya. The Vairagya is renouncing the higher things which really matter, which can really put you in bondage. So Swamiji said, since this small thing is of not much significance, unfortunately, Sturdy did not understand it. Once one Western woman, when she asked, he said, I don't believe in that Vairagya which can be blown away by a whiff of smoke. When she said, he of course said it jokingly, but there is a great truth in that. He said, can a cup of coffee or a whiff of smoke uh, destroy my entire Vairagya? I don't believe in a religion which will be destroyed. For example, people criticized why Buddha ate meat, why he ate. In fact, the last day he was given a very, in Bhiksha, he said, whatever I get as food, I eat it. So whether I should eat vegetarian food or non-vegetarian, which is more evil, in fact, killing of an animal. But he said, my vows, my religion teaches me that you have to go and beg in different houses, whatever they give. They in fact gave him pork on the last day. And of course he fell sick, but then he didn't care for his body. He said, I don't earn anything. I have to just beg for food. So that is how the attitude is. It's the attitude that is more important, and what you renounce, what Vairagya does to you, how does it bind you? Does it bind you to your family, your children, increase your worries, increase your anxieties, and curtail your freedom? Anything that takes you towards freedom is Vairagya. Anything that curtails your freedom. So perhaps smoking did not curtail his freedom, which a wife and children would have curtailed. Somebody asked him, why didn't you marry? If that is, he said, no, already I am bound by my body and all those sorrows. Why should I add further bondage to myself? So that is of primary importance. How much bondage, how much burden a person can carry, that he has to decide. If he can carry, as Janaka said, he could rule a kingdom and he could do anything, but still he was full of Vairagya. He owned a big kingdom, but he was not attached. That attitude was important. And he could He did not feel it as a burden. He said, even if the empire whole Mithila is burned to ashes, I don't care. So much of Vairagya and detachment he had. That is why Janaka became a Brahmagani. But for most people, they cannot even bear the burden of their own family. There are so many misunderstandings. They can't tolerate uh, many things which happen in their own family. So that is a far greater bondage according to Swamiji. And that is why he said, because it is of not much significance, I did not bother to remove that habit of mine. It never came in the way of absolute vairagya, which the great vairagya, the great renunciation, the renunciation which enabled him to enabled his guru to give him Brahma Jnana, that freedom which gave him that boldness to stand up. He said, I have traveled to some places in the Himalayas where the thermometer registered minus 53. When the Theosophists tried to kill him in America, he said, nobody can threaten me. He was so fearless. That is because of his Vairagya. So, a few small things, and because some of the disciples who were very dogmatic in certain things, some of them gave him up because he ate uh, any kind of food. But then Buddha ate, Rama ate, all the Kshatriya avatars ate animal food. So that doesn't mean these things are not as important. The food you eat, the clothes you wear, or what you do, as long as the basic ideas of renunciation, the renunciation of Kamini Kanchan, as it is said in Bengali, uh, these were the things which Sri Ramakrishna emphasized, and he did. Okay. Swamiji wanted to describe truth is not invented but discovered. Yes, that is true. Truth is always there, it has to be discovered. When you discover or uncover, there are layers of ignorance which we have to remove. Once we remove the layers of ignorance, then truth manifests itself. That is the idea. When truth manifests, it is an uncovering process. It is not something which has to be invented. It is already there. Just as gravitation was already there, Newton just discovered it, or he did not invent it. It was already there. The idea of gravitational force was there. Okay. Jesus said that what comes out of heart defiles, makes impure not the food that one takes. Yes, that is what most of the prophets believe. But unfortunately, we associate purity and impurity with gross things. That eating this, not eating this, touching this, not touching this. So, as Jesus said, as the Vedas say, all the scriptures are unanimous about this, that what comes from the heart is, it defiles. Even if you eat the purest food, Thakur Sri Ramakrishna himself said, a person may eat Havishyanna, which is supposed to be pure food, but he may be stealing money from others, he may be doing evil actions. So, what is the use? So, how the heart, how the evil has been removed from the heart, how compassionate one is, that is more important, not the food that one takes. Yeah, it is right. That is what Jesus said. Thank you for reminding. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.